Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fellowship Fridays Live. I am so sorry we're a little bit late. You can blame me for that, not these fine gentlemen here with me, because I totally messed up the times in my head. I'm still getting used to Central Time after living here for many years because somehow Eastern just seems more right to me. So I am so sorry we're a few minutes late, but we're glad to have you along. I'm here along with let's go counterclockwise this time. So today we have all of us together. Are down below me here is the Middle Earth Mixer. Good to see you. How's it going?
Good to be here.
It's been a while.
Doing good. Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're dressed in a full long sleeve shirt in the middle of the summer already. What feels like the middle of the summer, I guess. So.
Yeah. My wife and I are packing up our stuff to move, so I only have like a couple shirts in a bag that I can currently live off of.
I'm just sitting here. I'm trying to look good. Well, it's good to have you finally. I hope you don't sweat it out.
Me too. I might have to turn the fan on in a second.
Right. And then down below in the bottom right would be Austin Freeman, who we interviewed a few months ago, 2 months ago. Author of Tolkien Dogmatics, professor I hope I got that right, at Houston Christian University. And a lot smarter than a lot of people when it comes to Tolkien. He's done his research, so we're just going to be quiet and let him talk at times. No, I'm totally joking. We'll totally disagree at times. But good to have you. I like your shirt, though. You are
to be determined.
Fully pushed into summer mode. Looking good. All right, and then here to my other side, we've got Garet. Garet is a Tolkien fan we've known for many years. Was on our last live stream too, and now that we're in the evening, we are a little more free to not push our day jobs aside and really get things going, I guess. And hopefully we'll have Michael Jonas. So thanks, guys. Thanks for coming, even on a Friday evening. Kind of crazy. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. Particularly, I think maybe what we'll start with is the Gollum game, because it's just so bad. I live streamed it twice, and that was all I could take. It really was really bad. I mean, I'm looking at the Metacritic, a score of 35. Right? It's hard to get a score that low. So. I don't know. Have you? I'm the only one who's played it, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I watched the stream for a little bit.
Yeah, I tuned in too, and I don't play games, but I mean it was a bad premise, and then they executed it even worse. So
yeah.
So you know that meme that's like nobody, and then silence, and then it says.
The thing, yeah.
You want a Gollum game?
Yeah, right.
No, can you please give us Middle Earth Skyrim?
I don't understand how they sat down after finishing the game and said $60. That's where that's the price point for this game that has no character arc, that has no character like video game progression in it, where the visuals are janky at best. And like 2010, or maybe 2001 at worst, it feels so old. It feels so boring. I might live stream it one more time, but this time I'm going to have my 13-year-old kid play it while I comment and see if he does any better. And I'd like to see what he thinks about it, because it's just bad. But then what they did, right? They went in and they decided to apologize. Which,
but did you see the typo in the letter?
They're game programmers. Come on.
Oh, it's not here. The Lord of the Ring Gollum, right?
No, it's just the Lord of Ring.
The Lord. Did they miss the? They got it right here in this article on Bounding into Comics. But yeah, it was
like the Twitter caption that they put up with like the black and white text. It was the Lord of Ring Gollum.
I don't know. This is the kind of heart they put into it.
He is a single person, the Lord of Ring.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It would have been better if they didn't apologize at all. They should have just came out and owned it. Like, yeah, we did this. Deal with it.
They should have just been like the Homer Simpson meme when he just like backs into the bush.
Yeah, it was already horrible, and then it made it so much worse that they came out and they were like, "Oh, we're sorry."
Yeah.
Because you take a game. First of all, it's Assassin's Creed with no weapons and a game or a character that nobody wants to identify with at all whatsoever. So I don't know what they were thinking, and I don't know why they came out with it at all.
You know, I
Is
can
this
tell
like
you.
their attempt to do the Disney thing and like rewrite the story to have a sympathetic villain?
They said you'll
that,
understand him better. That was one of the things that they said. Like you'll understand Gollum better. Which let me tell you what I did in the first 2 episodes. I had to herd orc cows, put them in their pens.
No.
Yeah, Boroks they call them. Yeah, you had to like have them chase you because they're like angry cows, and then you had to like pull a lever to drop the gate to get them in there. That was number 1. I had to, of the dead prisoners, I had to collect their tags so that they would know who's dead and who's not. Like it's like their spreadsheet. That's the way I looked at it. It's like they have to find out which orc prisoners are dead and which aren't. So I had to collect like 7 or 8 tags or something like that. For some reason, I can't remember why exactly, because I was probably talking and they were trying to explain it in their horrible cutscenes. I had to grab red rocks off the floor, which apparently some sort of explosive device or explosive material, drop it into a barrel that then explodes down in some distant cave. Doesn't really do anything. It just explodes behind you. You have to escape before it collapses around you. Those were the 3, and they're tasks while you're prisoners of the orcs. Yeah. And that's where I said, like, what is the point? Why are we there? There's no character progression. There's nothing here. And they finished this game thinking like, good job, guys.
We did good.
We did good. This is
Like
People are
how
gonna
many
love
play
it.
hours is it supposed to be?
a lot too many.
Like what percentage of the game would you say that you have gotten through?
10 maybe. It was like
Wow.
4 hours. Well, probably 3 hours.
It was insufferably boring. I couldn't even imagine playing it. I mean, I watched for like 10 minutes, and it was just. I was like, "What are you even doing?" I watched this part where you're like stuck under a table or something, and I was like, "What?"
Oh yeah, like you have to hide under a table, and it's
I just
not
kinda-
obvious either. They don't really like. You have to figure it out as you go, and so you're like, oh wait, I can hide under there. I didn't see that. And
I would have just given up after like 5 minutes. You're a better man than me for sure when it comes to that.
For the fans.
For the fans,
For all of you, so you know never to do it on your own ever again. I'm trying to see how long it would take. Whatever it takes, it is way too long. I'm positive I will never take the time to actually finish out that game. But I can tell you why it was made, and that's because the company Daedalic got a grant from the German government to make it. So they got a few million euros to actually build the game.
That's a surefire way to end up with a steaming pile of crap is have it be government funded.
Why?
That's a really good question. I think we're all trying to figure that one out. Why? Because I guess that's something that the German government does.
Baseline budgeting. You got to meet that budget baseline from last year, so you get your funds for next year.
So, and not only that, the German government gave them a second grant to make the next Lord of the Rings game in their series. Mixer, you look completely like I like. There's nothing left to say. Like silence.
Lord of Ring, Wormtongue.
Oh yeah. What else can we do? Lord of the Ring. Bill Ferny.
Ooh, yeah, that's the DLC.
Sorry, my wife just opened the door for a second. What is so? Are they writing it off as like a public good? What is the?
Well, if they are, they're lying to everybody about it being a public good. Right? So Daedalic received a grant of over 2 million euros from the German government to work on another Lord of the Rings game. The hits just keep on coming.
Oh, look at the
joke,
paragraph
right?
up there. Look at the last line of the first paragraph.
Wait.
The world of J.R.R. Tolkien's novels.
Unbelievable.
I mean, the
The
level
German
of detail.
spelling.
It's the German.
Well, and
so-
the ironic thing is like we're shoveling like money into Ukraine on Germany's behalf, and this is what they're doing right now.
This is what Germany spends their money on. Is the Gollum game.
Don't get tanks.
Who cares about NATO? Gollum game. Yeah.
You have to love it.
Das Gollum game. It must be so good.
I would love to know.
Wissenschaft.
I would love to know like what
Now
party
he
in
does.
the Bundestag pushed that. Like, is there like a
It's
Tolkien lobby?
government thing. It was like
Grants Gollum.
The new
Saruman
government
party.
the new government needed like 2 more people, and they were like, "All right, we'll do what you
Oh my
want.
gosh.
Join in, and we'll
Gotta
make
be
the
Tolkien
Gollum game
fans.
for you."
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I realized I failed to mention number one. I'm Jonathan. I'm from the One Ring. But if you wanna throw up a question or comments, You can always use a super chat, and we'll see that much more easily. But yeah, throw them in there. We'll follow as much as we can. And Meat Lumps did say it's $70 if you want to buy it with all the DLC. Yeah. I got the Gollum emotes by paying $70 for that. So
I would say too, like if you compare this Golem to the Shadow of War Golem that came out in like 2014, it looks 100 times better. I saw somebody talking about that on
Wait, the
Twitter
Shadow of War
today.
Golem looks better.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
It's like
I still haven't played those.
Oh, really? It's I mean,
like
it's a wild ride when it comes to lore, but it's definitely fun.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The mechanics are really good, in my opinion, but the game is nothing like. I mean, they make Shelob into like sultry lingerie Shelob.
Yeah, I saw that,
which is kind of weird. And what else? Like you play, and you're infused with the spirit, like Celebrimbor. You share a body, kind of like Spock and McCoy in Star Trek 2. You share the body with Celebrimbor, and he's talking to you, and you can do magic things with him, and then you eventually. Should I spoil it all for you guys? What happens at the very end?
Yeah.
Does anyone care? You become a ring wraith. You become one of the ring wraiths. So it's all just like you're like, wait, how he was in the king? Wait, I don't. Anyway, but it's a well executed game, and if you just excise it from Tolkien lore completely and think like, okay, this is like fan fiction that somebody wrote and kind of wrote poorly, but it's well executed. It's fun. It's fine. You get it for $5.
The game itself is extremely competent, but as somebody who's like a big lore nerd, you go in and you're like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like the plot of Cyberpunk 2077, right?
I don't know. I haven't played that yet.
Like Keanu Reeves is Celebrimbor.
Oh yeah, he
which
like
would have been better.
Like possesses you in a technological sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't remember that.
I'm still good with Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and Lego versions.
Oh, I never played those either.
I've never played them, but I've definitely I have a lot of mutuals on Twitter who sing their praises.
It's a standard hot Lego style, right? With all the crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They've got some good. They've got like a ton of characters that you could swap out. You could do Sauron. You can do a cave troll. You can do both of Elrond's sons.
Already, it's better than Gollum.
Yeah, I don't know why we need Elrond and Eladan and Elrohir as playable characters, but they are in there. In the Lego game.
See, but at least they've got them in there. That means they actually did their research. In the Gollum game, right? I don't know, right? They even have like the person that you're talking to who's leading you through these caves. They just call him Frail Man. They don't ever like give him a name. They don't ever like explain why he's there. He's just literally on the screen. It just says Frail Man. That's it. And his beard moves like with his whole jaw the whole time. It's so abhorrently bad. And they get to make another one.
So will it be a sequel or will it be some other obscure character that nobody wants to identify with?
Well, that would be better, wouldn't it? Because then we wouldn't be judging it by the same whole thing. But I don't know. It's just so yeah. I thought so. Michael and I in our extended podcast that we did the other day, we were talking about like, oh, what would be a fun game? And so talking about like, I thought here was my idea. So let's see what you guys think. Is that you do a Diablo style game like isometric top down perspective, right? And you do it with the Angmar Wars, and you have like the 3 kingdoms, and your goal is to protect, the progeny of the North, right? The kings left, and bring them to Rivendell in the end, or to some sort of safe haven. And you're fighting in dungeons, and you're fighting the Witch King. You have to do all this. And you can at least do something that's a little more interesting, and it gives you some more leeway to create a story that isn't like, we know what Gollum is, right? We know the story of Gollum, and there's no redemptive character arc. There's nothing that allows us to actually like invest our time and our emotions into him. But you could do that if you did a smaller character. You did something a little more interesting.
Yeah. Correct. That is exactly the thing to do. I remember the Battle for Middle-earth 2 games, the Rise of the Witch King expansion pack. I was playing that in 6th grade when that came out, and I was obsessed with it. It solidified my obsession with Lord of the Rings that already existed. But I was like, oh, look, another story I didn't even know about,
Yeah.
So I
think that'd be good.
War in the North? Is that what it is?
That was another one. So they had the War in the North, I think came out for PlayStation, and you could you could create your own character, and there was like a couple different missions for stopping some obscure servant of Sauron that was had taken over the North, like during the Lord of the Rings, I think. but I never played it. I did read about it one time though, so that's my synopsis of what I've read.
We got any Lord of the Rings: The Third Age fans? I think that was PS2.
Huh? Really?
Yeah, was it? So you had like three. You had like an elf, a man, and a dwarf, and they were like running
Sorry,
parallel.
is this the beginning of a
tracks to
joke?
the main story. You guys remember this?
Elf
Yeah,
man and dwarf
yeah.
walk into a video game. Is that? What?
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
that.
There it is. Huh? I missed that.
And like I freaked out because we go through all of the levels, but it's a different story, right? So you go from Eriador and like into Moria and all of this stuff, and so it's like just on the edges of what's going on in the movie. And we got to Rohan, and like there was a random encounter with a Nazgul, like with a on a fell beast. And I remember being in like 7th grade and flipping out. It's like, I can't handle this.
I remember, Battle for Middle Earth. That was was that the real-time strategy game?
Yeah, it was so good.
That was so
It was
good.
incredible. Every game, and it just continued to get better, like as it went on.
It's so funny that like I don't know that they can't. They had. I mean, you have the Unreal Engine at this point. You shouldn't be able to like create something that looks worse than the games, and yet that's what we ended up getting. It doesn't give you much hope for, honestly, even for Amazon dropping in on their new MMO game that they're going to be creating. That's completely separate from the Rings of Power.
People cannot resist nowadays just coming out with slop. Like I don't understand it. It's like they can't help themselves. They just can't come out with anything good anymore.
Why is that?
I think at that level, it's because everything's being designed by like a committee essentially, right? I mean, it's a bunch of executives are like, I know what we should do. Let's capitalize this and let's get a team together. And it's not like it's a person's single vision that they're trying to bring into fruition. They're like trying to market something into existence, and so it's never going to be good. It might be shiny and pretty, but it's not going to.
Yeah.
I think it's because they used to give people a lot more creative independence. People would go in and they could take their passions to really build a good product. And now everything is rushed. Everything has to follow a specific corporate formula, and it shines through. When you play it, it's things are just not good for the most part.
It goes back to like we get so few good stories, and it takes a lot of it takes one person with a vision to do it, and whenever there's a government grant involved, generally it's not being driven by a person with any vision.
I'm hearing you say it, and I don't believe you. I mean, I know it's true, but I don't believe you.
It's in the article. I saw it. It's on the internet. It's true.
I don't know what to tell you, man. It seems like the dumbest thing in the world. Why would anybody ever decide that it's a good idea to give money just to a game company and say, here's a few $1 million, just throw out something and do Lord of the Rings. We're going to pay the license for that too. No, I don't. It doesn't. Like you said,
we need something to unite the country right now.
It's just like
Gollum game.
The name.
It's the Ender's Game of Germany.
The name of the company too,
They're training people.
Daedalic. I mean, that's kind of ominous too, right? Like, we're gonna fly a little too close to the sun.
I mean, it's gonna crash in flames. Yeah,
it's like the Mad Men drunk presentation meme where he's like,
great.
Gollum game.
Get $2 million.
Man.
Create Gollum game. Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Profit.
That's right. That's exactly right. I'm sure that's
the thing. They don't even have to have a profit, right? They got their $2 million in advance.
Got their $2 million. They spent it all on catering and vacation trips, and they're like, "Oh, we should make a game. Can we get like a couple guys in a room for a few weeks to like bang something out?"
To use some 2005 PlayStation.
Franz, we need a name for Frailman. Oh, I spent the last euro on beer.
So like,
we need a name for this frail man.
So a couple weeks ago, before we left from summer, on the faculty chat, like one of the other teachers like texted me and said, "Is the Candleman a character from Tolkien lore?" And I was like,
"Oh, that's because they introduced that at the end." Yeah, I know.
And then he sent me
a song of the Candleman. No, I'm sorry.
And we were all laughing. We're like, "No, that sounds absurd. Like, what are you even talking about?" And so then he sent the screenshot. He said it was from the Gollum game, and it was like some guy with a, and he like literally has like a birthday candle on the top of his head.
What?
That's right. I forgot. I had to
Can
go
you
to
drop
the.
a picture of that in the chat?
I don't, let's see if I can find it.
Is he a villain?
Man.
Yeah, he's supposed to be like a sympathetic villain, I think.
The Black Numenorian candle man.
Let's see here. I don't know.
Tandy Man was already taken.
Where is this guy? I haven't come to him yet. I had to go up to the. Where was it? I had to go up to some office up high that had a bunch of maps strewn around, and he looked at the map of Barad-dûr for about 2 seconds before he's like, "I've got the map," and then walks and turns away, and then you have to spend another like 5 minutes parkouring away from it. I don't remember. I remember them talking about you have to go meet the Candleman eventually, but I can't seem to find an image of him.
Is Sauron in it?
Not yet. I'm not
Interesting.
going to find out for you. I'm not going to take the time.
I won't do it.
Yeah.
You know, the
all right.
one thing going in. Sorry,
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the one thing going into that game that I did think was interesting that gave me a little bit of hope a couple months ago was I really liked the design for the mouth of Sauron because it just looked like he was wearing a bunch of human teeth, and I was like, man, that's metal. That's interesting. And it just turned out to be a total flop.
No, I haven't come across that either. It just makes me scared to like wonder how much time. Like it's all just chasing these things that you already know, and like, ooh, I get to experience that, and there's no other progression to the game. So anyway, all right. Well, speaking about progressions to games, we had another game release a bunch of stuff this week, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about things like that. The new Aragorn, which, okay, so I'm gonna preface this a little bit with like I understand the desire for changing this kind of stuff. I understand it, but I think it's stupid. I think it's amateurish. I think it diminishes both the idea of what Tolkien wrote and the heart behind saying like we want more representation, which I can understand from a certain perspective, but to take what's already been done and change it completely and not even give it a rhyme or a reason, because I don't know if you knew, see, I think I have it on here, is Éomer and Éowyn are completely different races in this game now. I don't know if you can see that. She's black and he's white. He's like Viking and she's something. It's really odd. So it doesn't even make sense.
She has white hair?
She has white hair, yeah.
She looks like Storm from the X-Men.
She does. Storm with braids. Yeah, she does. And obviously, anytime you criticize this, the first thing they say is racist. This is all that's all the only reason that you might have for this here. And my point has always been like, look, if you're going to do that, make it at least logical. Like, give it reasoning that we can say, okay, I understand how this works. But when it doesn't even work, when it's downtown LA represented in Middle Earth, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Can we go back to the Anduril card for a minute? So my biggest problem with this card is that to me looks 0% like Anduril.
Anduril, it does. It has the gem.
I was
here.
thinking
Like that is the most generic fantasy sword that I've ever seen.
It almost looks electronic.
Yeah.
Like the Jimon Hansu look for Aragorn.
That's who it is. You're right.
I love Jimon Hansu. Like that would be, if we're gonna do this, like you said, that would be really cool casting to do like an Aragorn, and we could put some lore into it, and like the Numenorians have this sort of darker blood because maybe they've got like Polynesian.
You could do it for
right?
sure.
Like you're in the middle of the ocean. That would be really cool to do. But we don't have any other races that this is being done to. Like that's what irritates me is like I teach at a predominantly Hispanic school. We've got no Hispanic representation in the fantasy world, like none. Like, can you guys think of a single like Latin character in a fantasy universe? So Michelle Rodriguez did a killer job in the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, but I can't think of another.
Probably example. Like the first thing I would think of is like the people of Dorne in Game of Thrones, maybe. But I mean, that's it's like a pretty obscure example.
I could see that. Yeah, because that was like, wasn't that Dorn. That was that the guy who plays the Mandalorian? Was he a Dornish?
It was Homeboy, yeah.
And was Dr. Bashir from Star Trek Deep Space Nine in
What's
that
his
too?
name? He's in Last of Us too.
Yeah.
Would Pedro Pascal not be
Yes,
like a
yes.
killer
Yeah,
Aragorn? Would he not be the best?
Oh,
He'd be
I
great.
Can see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he'd be
He'd be
great.
fantastic. Yeah.
And think about like in terms of like cultural cachet, like Spanish speaking peoples, you've got this mixed legacy of like they've got a lot of like really beautiful things, but they've also got this sort of like conquistador past of like imperialism. So there's this mix between the Numenorian legacy of like making really great cultural artifacts while also sometimes like oppressing other people. It all sort of plays into your own cultural resonance. If we're gonna do it, then like if we're going to go whole hog on like on diversity and on like racial equity in card games and stuff, then actually do it. And let's
That's always my point. You know, my main concern is that the morals and the philosophies of Tolkien shine through in whatever project is coming forth. So when it comes to diversity on any project, my thing has always been like you and Jonathan have just said, make it logical, like make me believe the story, make it make sense within the story, have people who are supposed to be in the same family look similar. I mean, it's pretty basic, low effort stuff that you can do, and having a brother and sister, you know, look totally completely different, like Éomer and Éowyn. It just seems lazy, you know, hastily thrown together.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, can somebody give me a rundown of what Magic the Gathering is? Because I don't even.
Yeah.
Austin. I've never
gotten
played
enough. I've extracted enough knowledge on the internet in the past couple of days to see that it's clearly some kind of game, something similar to Yu-Gi-Oh or something. But I don't really know what it is.
Who have any of us played it actually?
No, I don't even know what it is.
Okay. Jonathan, have you played it?
No, I have not.
Okay. That makes me the resident expert, even though I have never played it either.
Oh,
Okay.
Awesome. Go for it.
So Magic the Gathering is a deck building game, which means that you pay money and you collect cards of varying power levels. And so you build your deck, and there's a lot of overlapping strategies that go into it because there's different sort of they're color coded, but each of the different colors is associated with a particular strategy. And so you can make them all work together, or you can just play one particular color card. And for Magic itself has really, really deep and complicated lore, like in its own universe. But it also has created these expansion packs. And like I have a couple friends that are really, really into it and spend like an irresponsible amount of money on some of these. And so one of my friends, her concern is that Wizards has started pumping out so many cards that it's actually messing with the balance of the game.
Oh.
And so there's like a lot of dissatisfaction with Wizards of the Coast in general over how they're handling Magic. Yeah. And some like the original lore for Magic is really interesting. So speaking of conquistadors, there's like this whole expansion pack where there's like this vampire empire that like goes over to the South American stand-in, and they're looking for the what is it, the spring of life, like in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And you know, so you got these like vampires in full plate colonial armor with the ruffle collars. It's like it's really cool imagery.
That's interesting. That actually sounds like a 1950s radio show I listened to as a teenager called like the Black Temple or something. That's exactly what the storyline of that was. I'd have to look that up. But anyway, that's.
Is it like a?
So that's what puzzles me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, is it like Dungeons and Dragons where you have you have cards and then the board, and then there's like role playing involved?
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have cards, but it's the same company that makes them. There's no role playing; it's just a strict like.
You create a deck for yourself, and then you play against other people with the same deck. Yeah, I used to play the Star Trek customizable card game a long time ago.
To them, so
yeah,
you know, I think though that this idea that you have this lore, this mythology that Tolkien basically drew from Europe, from Northern Europe, from the British Isles and everything else. And we want to share that. We want that to people to the idea that that a person cannot have commonality with these characters, can't identify with these archetypes in Lord of the Rings unless they have the same color of skin as them, just seems so unbelievably shallow to me. And also the idea that somehow people with a different skin color, whether they're black or Hispanic or whatnot, are unable to create their own worlds and their own stories that are unique to them. Both of those two things to me, just I look at this and it's just kind of a tokenism. I think we made that pun last time, but it's like a tokenism where it's like, okay, yeah, we basically put Aragorn in blackface, and if you say there's something wrong with that, you're the racist. And I just find it to be so inverted, such a horrible way to go about it.
I think the implication too is when you see it, and again, I applaud the effort and where people are coming from with things like that, but it's almost implied because we have the description of Aragorn from Tolkien himself, right? It's written there in the book, what he looked like. So the desire to change it almost implies that it's not good enough the way it is. Does that make sense?
Well, they believe that. They believe it's not good enough because it's not representative enough.
Well, so here's the thing. This is one of the things that I appreciated about. Don't flame me. This is one of the things that I appreciated about when Rings of Power was doing
careful.
The system.
You're not allowed to bring up that show, which will not be named here.
So
I'm joking.
They actually went to the texts and they pulled out lines that talked about how Harfoots had darker skin color. I mean, if you look at the first few pages of The Hobbit, where Tolkien is describing hobbits, what does he say? They have dark curly hair, and he says they have brown fingers, right? And I don't know what that means. I guess because have they been in dirt? I don't know. But like he's talking about hobbit skin tone. So if you want representation, you've got the text where it says hobbits can have darker tones of skin. So there it is in the text. It makes sense. Just make hobbit culture black.
But the problem
with that was like you had I'd be fine with that. Just make them all look the same, So when I'm watching it, my brain isn't going, that's not right. These people are all members of like what's supposed to be a homogenous group. So I wish they would all look that way as opposed to, having somebody who's a cousin.
It would be the equivalent of saying, all right, we're going to take this Maori tribe from New Zealand, and then we're going to add some Scots. We're going to add some Nigerians. We're going to add some Mongolians. We're going to add some Thai. Right? It doesn't make any sense because it'll look all different. You can't say they're Maori anymore because they don't fit the role any longer.
That's exactly the point I was making.
Like, why would you do that?
Think about how boss it would have been to say, like, to base the Númenóreans off of the Maori, off of like New Zealand culture. Like, how many levels would that work on? That would be so cool.
And at least they would have said, you know what, I don't really like what you did, but I can get on board with that because you're making it make sense in a way within that story that you're telling, rather than it obviously being a play. And that's the problem too, is that when they make these
the Rock
moves,
is Aragorn,
that when they make these plays, right, immediately like you start thinking like, well now we have you chose that person because of their skin color, not because of any other reason. And to our own detriment, we might be thinking that, but that's what ultimately ends up happening if you're saying, I am going to, since our biggest value is diversity, equity, inclusion, and making it a representation of the modern world, then we start judging it because you made those decisions rather than I'm going to create the best show possible or create the best game possible or create the best card game possible.
Tolkien talked a lot too about the virtues of making sure that your reader is grounded in a story. And when you have these things, like I said, a small homogenous tribe of people who look completely different from one another, that's one of those things. It's like it tickles your brain and goes, this doesn't seem consistent, based off of all logic that I know. But okay, let's go with it. And I think that the Rings of Power could have been so much better if they had just chosen how they wanted the Harfoots to look.
Yeah. So here's you guys told me I needed to bring it in terms of scholarship. So here's my first contribution. Tolkien's famous quote about having removed all explicit reference to religion in The Lord of the Rings. He says it's instead subsumed into the metaphysics of the story. The reason why he does that is because of his philosophy of subcreation, right? And that's the reason why he finds the King Arthur myth distasteful, is because it mixes elements of the primary world into your little subcreative reality. So think like you have like a little bonsai tree or like a little doll house. And I've seen some incredibly intricate doll houses. You could do like little miniature photography and you could stage a scene. If you're looking at that photograph, if you're inside that, you can imagine that this is real. But when the cat photobombs the picture, all of a sudden you realize that the scale is not true to life, right? All of a sudden this is now fake. This is an imitation of reality. And therefore its infelicities, its inadequacies are going to become really evident. And it takes you out. That's Tolkien's problem. And so that's exactly what happens in this new trend of casting. And it's not just with the Tolkien works, it's with anything. I want to give actors of color their shots. Like that's not the problem. The problem is, like we said, subsuming the quality of the art underneath different concerns. And so if you have it be consistent, and if we want to make all of the Harfoots have dark skin and all of the Númenóreans be Maori or something like that, it makes sense based on the lore. It does not take you out of the story. There is a way to get your DEI quota while also making sure that that's not interrupting the flow of the story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like, if you want to do that, you can do both. You can. You just have to do it well. And so I just don't understand the decisions that are being made. Like I mean, I understand why people are motivated to do this, but I don't understand why they don't want to do it well.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I look at, like, again, the idea that you have to kind of cannibalize Tolkien to do it. You know, like, why can there not be stories unique to cultures that fill that quota, so to speak? You know, why do we have to take something that was written in the middle of the 20th century that's referring back to ancient, European mythology and languages, and then say, in order for us to have, true diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to take this work and then bring it up to where we think it should be now? My question is, we've got incredible, writers of all races. We have incredible directors and actors and actresses, and all of these people. Create your own stories, create your own games, create your own cards, like, and create them in a way where you're creating a whole new world. Like, why must you take something that, and I think part of it is because, like I've said before, this is, the Lord of the Rings really in particular is kind of the capstone of the Western canon. It incorporates Tolkien's full metaphysics and cosmology, and draws from every discipline of literary art, and draws from every religious energy that he can put into it in a subcreative kind of way. It all hangs together, and it's I think one of the things that I read last year, I read Rod Dreher's book, "I Live Not by Lies," and he talks about, I forget the name of the family, but when they were under communist rule and they didn't have Bibles, as a family they read the Lord of the Rings to remind them what evil was, right? And so, and it's how one of the ways they survived that period of time. And I think you have in Tolkien's work this universal good that people want to essentially kind of fragment and weaken and take its meaning away from. And I think this is one of the ways you do it, is you constantly, it's like, how many times do we, we talked about a remake of the movies, of the Jackson movies. Like, do we need to do that again? We've had 3 Spider-Mans in 20 years. We've had 5 Batmans in like 20 years. We've had how many Supermans?
Yeah.
It was
4
like,
Spider-Mans, actually.
Yeah. 4, you're
that's
right.
a good point.
That's a
the
good point.
cartoon
Actually,
version.
the last one was my favorite because that was like the Gen X Spider-Man. But the point being is, like, come up with a new hero, a new story, someone, please. Like, It's kind of pathetic, really.
So that leads me into a couple of things I wanted to talk about, and we'll just jump right in. These are the last questions on my list, but since we're there, we might as well go there. So here's and these kind of go hand in hand. And you already brought this up in a way, Garet, was that what was it about the mid 20th century that produced so much good fiction? Right? There's something about that time period where we go to the science fiction writers of the time, the fantasy writers, and before then too. But I think, like you said, Garet, it hit its nadir at the mid 20th century. Right? We have Ray Bradbury, Asimov, Tolkien, Charles Williams was still. I mean, you could even throw like not just like G.K. Chesterton, some of his fiction works from a little bit earlier than that. But you hit so much good fiction that was so deep, so well done, so original. And we're not getting any of that. So 2 questions then that I thought would be interesting to kind of dive into. One is what was it? And Austin, I'm sure you have some input into this here. What was it about the mid 20th century that produced so much good fiction, at least in my opinion, or maybe I'm wrong? And the second question is, will Hollywood ever make anything good again? Will we get anything? Like, it feels like everything is a retread. Even when you look at like the popular shows on Amazon that are good, like Jack Reacher was fun. There's that one with Chris Pratt. That was good. But all those are stories other people wrote. They're not creating themselves anything new. They have to go to other people to get it. Even the Tom Clancy one with Jim from The Office. What's the name? I can't remember. It was
John
well
Krasinski. It was the Jack Ryan series.
Jack Ryan series. Yeah, right. But even that is going back 30 years to almost 40 years.
I mean, it's like what I was reading in junior high, right?
So, Austin, I'm going to first go to you because you're more in that and you've researched that and you've talked about it, I think, in some ways. But maybe what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a difficult question. So I'm going to sort of come about it from a circuitous route, and maybe we can get somewhere. So with Tolkien and Lewis and those sorts of people, at least in that circle, they live in the mid 20th century, but they're raised in Edwardian England, and they're raised in a conservative culture in Edwardian England. So if we want to talk about their thought world, where's their thought world coming from? It's coming from the Victorians. It's coming from the late 1800s. I mean, remember, Tolkien's born in 1892. He was 8 when Queen Victoria died. Like, he could remember her. So I think especially those particular authors, we have to look maybe further back than their current culture to understand what's shaping them. And if we look back into what's going on most of these are British authors. I can't think of any like really impactful American fiction authors of the time, but that's not my specialty. They're reacting to
Faulkner, Fitzgerald.
So Fitzgerald's got his own issues. But I mean, Faulkner, we could talk about Faulkner. Like, what's going on with the British fantasy writers of the early to mid 20th centuries? They're all reacting to late Romanticism. And they're all reacting to a particular concept of the imagination, which is influenced by guys like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Wordsworth, John Ruskin, William Morris, all those folks that have a larger vision of how society, the individual, God, nature, art, all of these things fit together. So there is a unifying, coherent worldview that they inherit. And nowadays, we have no unifying, coherent worldview. We don't even have a unifying, coherent American culture.
Right.
But why does having a coherent, unifying culture bring great art, bring great stories? What is it about that births that?
So I think part of it is it helps you understand plot better. Right. It helps you understand what matters and what is lasting. Because you have a built-in, almost like a natural law, like a natural ordering of value. But secondarily, like if you read George MacDonald's essay on fairy stories in his book, in his collected essays, A Dish of Orts, and this is one of the things that Tolkien was in when he was writing his draft of On Fairy Stories, which is his sort of manifesto for how to do fantasy. MacDonald says that all of the images and symbols that we draw upon in our own works of fiction are intended by God, right? God has put this deep well of symbolism and meaning into the world for us to find and use. So it would not be the same if Aslan were a baboon, or if he were even a tiger, right? There are particular intent, like divinely intended meanings for these things, and we tap into them when we use them. It's not the other way around. It's not that we're imbuing these symbols with meaning. It's that we're finding the pre-existing meaning that's sort of being brought out. Now, metaphysically, whether you want to buy into whether that's true or not is beside the point. These fiction authors did think it was true.
Yeah.
And so Tolkien says, when you're looking for fairy, you tap into this deep well of power within the universe. Like, go back to On Fairy Stories, read some of his drafts. He talks about it, like drilling down into this this like underground ocean of meaning, of power. And where does that come from? Like, if you don't have a relationship of God to society, then you don't have any image of like what would a worthwhile quest even be. If you don't have a vision of, if you don't have a vision of the human person and of what it means to live an excellent life, how can you have a character arc, right? There's all sorts of implications that are downstream of these sorts of questions.
And what you're saying is at that point in time. Okay, I'm wrapping my head around that to figure out. So that's a part of it, I think, and the other thing that we brought up was, so where do you think the pain of the first half of the 20th century, in the sense World War I, World War II, plays into these great stories too? Because you were talking about how having a character arc, or knowing what is true and good, and the digging into the deep wells. Well, if you've never had to dig deep because you've gone through horrible experiences and the pain of losing many loved ones, many friends, of seeing destruction and gore really through that, like, how does that lend itself to what we got in the mid 20th century with these stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is the fact that they know what real evil is like, and they have actually experienced resisting it and the dangers of what resistance means. Like, it's not one thing or the other. Tolkien is very explicit in his letters that he has seen orcs on both sides of the war.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Tolkien is a war author. Lewis is a war author. Charles Williams is at least affected by the war.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is one of the big objections to most Marvel villains, right? Like, the Marvel movies are well-crafted products, but they don't have a lot of subtext.
Yeah. To say the
and
least.
The villains are just sort of like forgettable because we don't really understand what their motive is or why they're dangerous. But what's the one Marvel villain that everybody talks about?
Thanos, right?
Thanos.
Yeah.
Why?
Because there's a logic to his evil. It's like,
because he went through, didn't he? Wait, I'm trying to remember what his origin story was.
His goals are pretty clearly defined, I guess, in a way that his goals and his intentions are fleshed out in a way that a lot of Marvel villains just aren't, because they don't put enough effort in.
But why do we see Thanos as scary?
I mean, I see there's a cold logic to his view. Like, he's not going to be persuaded because he's completely consistent within himself. You know, his whole idea is I'm going to reduce the population, and that's what's necessary. And I'm willing to die on behalf of all this.
I think also because he thinks he's the good guy, right?
Yeah.
He thinks he's doing the right thing. And in the same way, right, every villain who is, I don't know, worth his salt thinks they're doing the right thing. They don't think of themselves as the villain. And he doesn't. I don't know. Is that where are you going with this, Austin? What is it that you're angling towards?
Partially, I just want to know what you guys think. But I mean, yeah, I think that's part of it. Like, Thanos is almost a challenge to the virtue of the Marvel heroes because, like you said, Thanos is consistent. He is logical. He has pursued a struggle for a goal which he perceives as noble. And there's a sort of a noble resignation to him. Thanos does not struggle. He has resigned himself. He has accepted within himself what he is and what he has to do. And like Iron Man has not, even Captain America has not, right?
Right.
So this like modern view of the fact that all heroes have to be flawed, like Thanos isn't really flawed.
He just has a different set of principles.
Right. Like he's the Ubermensch, right? He
Yeah.
operates on a different set of principles. He's like this Homeric glory character that he is the strongest and therefore he is the best. Anyway, like, but that's what's scary about Thanos, is because Thanos' motivation is pretty much the same thing as Sauron's motivation in a lot of ways. Like Thanos wants, he knows how the universe ought to run. And he knows it better than anybody else. And so he's going to, like he says, I'm going to do it myself. And so he's going to take control. He's going to take charge. And he's going to literally reshape reality in accordance with his will. And he believes that he is doing something righteous and noble. And he is going to do what's best for everybody else, whether they know it or not. And that's Sauron.
Yeah.
And that's an archetype that you see quite a bit, right? So you have, I think of, obviously like Milton's Lucifer, what's his name? Is it Alan Bloom? One of the Blooms says, Lucifer's the hero of the story for that reason. He's in pursuit of freedom and liberty. And so you see that, or you have your like Hephaestus, the god who brings fire to man, sets man free, that kind of thing. And so oftentimes you can structure, if you change the perspective, like, well, the villain can be the hero. And that's really kind of what we're obsessed with as a culture right now. We want to actually do that. But in the sense,
we want to create the Gollum game.
Right. We want to create the Gollum game or the whatever. But I think too, one of the things that made, to go back to your original question, Jonathan, about why you had these great authors at this period in time, I think you have a couple of things. What Austin was saying is so true. When it comes to, they were inhabiting kind of a cosmology, a literary cosmology that was from a time previous to modern time. Lewis wrote The Discarded Image. Tolkien is drawing from all these other story arcs and various things from old myth and the old stories. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they've read Jane Austen. They've read the modern English novel. The idea that you can take these kind of abstract things and then bring them into real life in this kind of like that kind of fictional world that you would find in Austen, where it's more like grounded. Which is, I just read an interesting paper last week about how and I talked a little bit about this last time. The Scouring of the Shire is kind of transitions to the form of the English novel, like right at the end of Lord of the Rings. It's been epic, it's been everything else, but at the end it transitions. It becomes about the home, and the great villains are kind of shrink down to now they're like Fagin from Dickens, or those other kind of Dickinson characters. And so you see that transition. I think that's what made them so good as writers, is they kind of blended those two things. They have these old archetypes and these old narratives that they're now bringing into a way for us to receive them in that kind of narrative novel form. And you see that especially in Lewis, more so than Tolkien, who kind of remains that epic.
I think another point worth mentioning too is, and it goes along with both your points, I think, but it's an important aspect of the whole ethos that's driving these good authors, at least the ones that we like. Coming out of World War I, there was a lot of cynicism about the human race in general, about what we were capable of achieving, and a lot of writers responded to that by making stories that were just grim and cynical. And I think a lot of really horrible things happened in World War I. So the darkness is understandable. And I think people like Tolkien and Lewis wanted to also stand up to a lot of that cynicism that was popular among their own circles in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like the role of optimism in these authors cannot be understated. I mean, Chesterton has it too, even though he's a little earlier. Like Chesterton encapsulates his optimism because he went through like the dark night of faith in his art school days. Like he had an existential crisis and he became a nihilist and became suicidal, and then he worked through it. And this goes right back to this. So there's two streams of romanticism when we're going back to history. There's two streams of romanticism that sort of split. And like the Wordsworth, Coleridge, Ruskin, Morris stream that goes into modern fantasy because it embraces optimism. And then you've got like the Byron, Shelley, other stream that goes into develops Gothic literature and eventually horror. And that
like the Kurt Cobain romantics.
Yeah, the cynicism, the decadence, the ennui of the universe, right? And the same sort of moment happens. You're exactly right. After World War I, and the reason why Tolkien's optimism is powerful is because it's real. It's not naive optimism. Tolkien knows what suffering is. Yeah. He is not glib about what it takes to say yes to the world, but he does it anyway. And that's a lasting impact. You know, we started off before this live stream went on the air, we were talking a little bit about Ted Lasso. And I think like if you want to talk about an optimistic TV show in the current day and age, like Ted Lasso is probably going to be the one everybody goes to. And the reason why Ted Lasso is powerful for the people that like it is because it's also not naive. Like it deals with real issues of divorce and mental health and like feeling like you are in the wrong job, feeling like you're purposeless in life. And then choosing to move through all that and say yes to the world. Now, the problem with Ted Lasso is that he doesn't have any philosophical underpinning for why the world should be positive.
Right.
And that links us exactly back to this world picture, this coherent world picture.
So maybe that's why we're not getting anything great out of Hollywood because there is no underpinning to anything they're writing.
Yeah. So there's an interesting question about like why people like Batman better than Superman, for instance. And most people say because Batman is more relatable, he's more interesting. It's harder to write Superman stories because Superman is supposed to be the representation of what is good. Mm-hmm. And that changes over time. The opposite changes over time.
What changes over time is what is good.
Yeah, like Lex Luthor starts off as a mad scientist and now he's a corrupt politician, right? It's a mirror that's held up to our culture. Mm-hmm. But right now that mirror is fractured because we have no idea what goodness is in this culture. And so we cannot write good Superman stories and therefore we cannot write very good redemptive stories unless we're tapping into something else.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time. I don't know what it's going to take for us to get these kinds of stories created again, because people aren't reading, people don't have the faith, right? It's not being passed on. People don't have the skills because they're not willing to put in the time. They're watching live streams on YouTube instead, and so it makes me a little sad. I've been reading. I read it in high school. I'm reading it again for the first time in a long time. Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and I'm just like, oh man. This kind of writing, right? It's written so well he creates a story that is engrossing, but is so prosaically well done. I'm still sitting there stunned that like the story is there because it doesn't feel like it should make any sense in a way sometimes when you read it. But anyway, and I just long for something new and great, and we're not getting anything. I don't know, even the closest I got to it, honestly, in the last 30 years was probably, I don't know if you guys ever read it, but it was a completely engrossing book to me. It was Hyperion by Dan Simmons. I don't know if any of you have read it. In any case.
The comic book?
No, Hyperion is he wrote it in the same way, like, man, how do I put this? It's a series of shorter stories, not really short stories, but shorter stories that he modeled after the Canterbury Tales. It's science fiction. Of people essentially going on a pilgrimage to a place called the Time Tombs. Anyway, and it's a science fiction story, really well written. I enjoyed it immensely. It's one of my top 3 or 4 science fiction books of all time. And that was the only time where I was like, this is an incredible book, and I couldn't put it down. So.
Downloading.
Yeah, Hyperion. If you guys haven't read it, I hope I'm not
Yeah,
overselling it, but I know everybody who I've recommended it to at least really enjoyed it and found it. Dan Simmons is a really great writer too. He's written a few really interesting books. His other duology, I guess, Ilium and Olympus, which was an interesting idea, which I actually enjoyed a lot too. Anyway, yeah, I hope they make the good stuff again. I mean, the only thing we got recently that I really, really enjoyed on TV was honestly Star Trek Picard season 3. But
I haven't seen any of that.
that was not new. It was taking all
it's
the
a
old
it's a
characters.
retread.
Yeah, but somebody knew how
Yeah.
to at least take the character. Somebody with passion was there building it. But
I actually enjoy The Mandalorian. I don't know about y'all, but I know
I haven't
there's
seen
mixed
season
feelings
3.
on that. Season
Okay.
3, I enjoyed it immensely.
I'm just going to throw something out really different. I've been watching Mrs. Davis. Have you heard of this show
No.
on Peacock? Okay, this is really hard.
Peacock.
It's really hard
There's
to
your
explain.
problem.
Yeah, it's on Peacock. I know, right? I only have it free because I have T-Mobile, and they're like, "Here's a year for free." Great. All right, good. But it's the story is, well, it's theological because it's the story of a nun in a world where everybody is essentially has like an AirPod in their ear talking to the AI called Mrs. Davis all the time, and she doesn't want to talk to it. But then she's given a message, or she's given a task. Essentially, the AI will kill itself if she goes and destroys the Holy Grail. And so this becomes this whole Holy Grail thing. And then it becomes a treatise into what does having a relationship with Jesus mean, both from a personal perspective, from a church perspective. If I was like deep into theology, which I think the rest of you are probably more in than I am, but I would understand more about it, particularly if you're Catholic, because I think that's where it's written from. But wait, we have no Catholics here on the panel today. I don't think that's amazing.
But I have heard about that because I read Bishop Barron and watch. Bishop
that's
Barron
why
sometimes.
that's exactly why I watched
Yeah.
it, because he recommended it.
Yeah.
Bishop Robert Barron. So anyway, if you guys want something that, and it is completely unique, it's off the wall. I love kind of off kilter stuff. It has a humor to it that sometimes it harkens back to sort of some of the absurdity, like Monty Python at times. Like I just feel like they try to tap into the weirdness of it sometimes, and you're just going like, that's just so weird, but I love it, at least for me. So I something new and different.
Better than the what is it? The Dirk or what's his name?
Dirk Gently.
The Dirk Gently
Holistic Detective Agency.
Yeah, that was horrific, that show, because I'm a big fan of those books. And I was like, some English humor,
Yeah,
some
I
Chester.
can't do it. It's so wrong. All right. Well, I think we can close down. Yeah. Guys, I think this might be the time that we have to go into the weekly. Maybe I need to create a little theme for this with a little montage into the Rings of Power Fallout, or whatever we want to call out this here. And there are a couple things. I think the more interesting one is that Rings of Power has been blamed for essentially its budget. It took over. It was too big for other shows, right? It sucked so much money out of Amazon's balloon of cash and killed shows. So even the creator of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I've never watched, said, yeah, the Rings of Power, they just said, we don't have the money anymore for you, so we're just going to kill your show. And we're going to do Rings of Power instead, which somehow I don't feel like that's getting them more bang for their buck.
It must be if they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where they're going to go with the Rings of Power. Nobody came out of it going like, I love this show so much. And so they're going to throw another $500 million at it and create season 2. When they could have taken that and created far more interesting TV shows. And they're doubling down on some of their other ones, even though other people are pulling back. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that and where that might go in the futures when they throw so much money at one property that they're hoping hits so hard, and then they're like, no, you guys, you will like it. We're going to have more people. What is it? Something like 66% of the people who only 33% or somewhere around there of the people who started watching it actually finished watching it. So nobody is finishing it.
I've always been curious, though, what is the average for shows? Because I can think of a lot of things that I've watched an episode of and then just haven't finished. So I'm wondering what is the industry average for that kind of stat, because I think it was just thrown out there, and I'm not sticking up for the Rings of Power or anything, but I have never really seen an article that has used that to attack a show before. So when I first saw that was immediately what I thought of. What is this? How significant is this statistic really?
Yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah.
I'm looking it up. If anybody's got a link they want to throw at us, that'd be great. I'm sure, for instance, like The Mandalorian, right? The first season of The Mandalorian. Let's compare at least apples to apples, because their hope was that The Rings of Power would be kind of like The Mandalorian, which is like, we're bringing Star Wars to TV. We're bringing Lord of the Rings to TV. The amount of people who finished watching season 1 of The Mandalorian, I am sure, was much higher than 30% of who started it. Like, it's probably closer to like 90.
Yeah,
I'm going to see if I can find that. But
While y'all are doing that, I actually have to go put my ducks to bed.
What?
So I'll be back in like 5 minutes.
Oh, that's crazier than putting your ducks in a row.
Bring one.
Yeah.
Bring one.
Well, you're walking into your hobbit hole. I saw you like go off in the distance. That was amazing.
Vanishing into.
So let's see. Disney's Mandalorian. I have no idea. I wish, I'm not that prepared for this live stream to actually like have these numbers on hand, or as they say, on demand stream.
I mean, my guess is that it's probably more popularly received than we would hope.
Because I think the Mandalorian is that big Star Wars. There's a lot of kids watching. I mean, I started the Mandalorian and I haven't finished it, so that's.
Did you watch all of season 1 though?
I did. Yeah. So I guess that would be
that's a
good
comparison.
response to that there. And again, I think like the Rings of Power gets what it deserves. However, I just am curious. Like,
it's a valid point. It's like when people saying like right now, Target's stock is taking a dive. I'm like, okay, let's also talk about what else might be going on in their market that they have to worry about, other than just boycotts and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, he's back. Okay. That green screen is amazing.
It took like the ring off right when he came out.
There we
Are they tucked in nicely? Did they quack at you?
It's mating season right now, so this process is pretty painful because I have bruises from duck bills.
So are they angry at you, or are they coming on to you is the question.
It's like a lot of incel rage right now. It's two boys. We don't have to deal with the eggs. We have a 1 male to 3 female ratio with ducks.
Incel rage. Is that what Sauron had in The Rings of Power at the end?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Galadriel certainly wasn't giving him any attention, so
precisely.
She's not into it. Like, good for her, rightly so.
We'll man. See. Just as Tolkien intended.
Okay. Exactly.
Yeah. Still got to be my least favorite part of the show is that they take Tolkien's words and put them in the wrong characters' mouths at the wrong times. And
it sucks because the shippers, the people who are doing who want Galadriel and Halbrand to be in a relationship with one another, it's like I can't even grab them by the collar and go, that violates the rules. Because with Melian,
That's like, right.
Be like, what about Melian? And I'm like, stop.
Well, perhaps that's the reason why they had therapists on hand to deal with things on the Rings of Power.
So here's something interesting if we want to talk about analogies is, like a book of First Enoch talks all about angelic beings that come down and try to take mortal, I guess in this case, elvish women. So maybe there's some Enochic literature fans somewhere.
Enochic?
I'm a fan. Is that it? I'm a fan of Enoch, but at the same time, the Book of the Watchers. But at the same time, I don't think that they had me in mind when they wrote the script.
Oh man! All right. So this is an interesting thing, right? So this goes back to the whole thing. It goes back to one of the first things we talked about, which was the Magic the Gathering making changes. And right, the first thing that they say is, if you disagree with this, that you are dealing with some percolating racism inside your own self that you have to deal with if you disagree with the black elf in the middle of everything else. If you disagree with the black dwarf in the middle, if it doesn't make sense, then you're racist. But they had a therapist on set. And part of this to me is like, maybe they have therapists on set for all Hollywood actors now because they all seem pretty eggshell thin. Right, none of them are able to do it, so maybe this isn't that different. But I go back to Right? They dealt with issues, right? They obviously there's a lot of online stuff, and there are jerks online, and all you have to do is tune them out, right? But maybe since they don't have a grounding like we talked about, there's nothing that lets them tune things out because there's nothing greater for them to lean back on or stand on, like a faith or a morality or a philosophical underpinning that is true to the world. So for instance, I just like when I switched. So I switched theonering.com from just a news site at some point. This was a couple years ago. I went to the Babylon Bee, did their podcast for the Lord of the Rings for a while. And then I just decided, I'm like, I hate doing news. I can't just forget it. So then that's when I got Michael and got Dan. We did the podcast. I kind of you guys. We started all this stuff. And so there are people, right? And like, I'm not going to hide my own views when I'm doing a podcast with other people and I'm talking about why Tolkien is important to me and why the world, the truths of the world are meaningful to me in the ways that they are. But there are a ton of people who got angry at me, who like messaged me because they hated that I what did I do? I quoted Jordan Peterson for some reason somewhere, and that was apparently like for them. And so the site used to. I know, right? You know, and even back in when the site before social media, when we had a message board and there were 50,000 people a day coming there, there was so much infighting, right? And since I was one of the founders, they would always like come to me, and I was have to be like sometimes the arbiter. We had moderators and things like that. But one time, somehow somebody got my phone number and called me and wanted to talk about why he'd been banned. Actually, this happened twice. Then I found out he recorded the conversation that I had with him in the hopes that he would actually be able to post it and like make me look really bad to all the other people on the message boards. And so there are bad actors, and there are things like this that you deal with. And I didn't have a therapist. Sadly, we didn't have the money.
Are you okay?
The OneRing.com, but I was okay. And I'm just like, it seems like, am I being too harsh in thinking like, this is the result of approval parenting, of safe spaces, of everybody gets a trophy, is that you can't deal with it when people are, horrible to you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you can go.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I look at this and I have a hard time believing that the racial backlash is as significant as anyone actually is claiming. It's more of a way for them to get extra attention. There's probably some trolls on Twitter that they're worried about. I don't know. I'm not on Twitter, but it just seems like it's completely, I mean, this is a narrative that the showrunners want. They want people to be like, hey, let's tune into the show and see, because there's these racists that hate it. And the reality is, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I didn't have a problem with this Cordova actor playing. I thought he was like one of the actually kind of cool characters, even though some of his lines were really ridiculous. But he was a good actor and he played the part well, and it was fine. And I think there might be some logic where maybe, he could exist, but whatever. But I really think this is more about trying to, what is the term? It's just get some eyes on articles, and I don't know.
Yeah. I think the reality is a blend of two truths, two sides. I think that the racism is very real, and I think that because of the online world that we live in, the voices can be very loud, and it really depends on what type of personality you are. And I don't know what kind of personality Ismail Cordova is, but he might be one of those people that goes on deep dives where he shouldn't, and maybe that's his fault.
True.
But I also do think that Amazon definitely leans into it. I think that they want the narrative to be people don't like the show because of the diversity, not because there's problems with the story.
Well, it's a smart move for them to make, to be honest.
Yeah, and I understand it, but I think that it's bad faith to lean into that. However, I do acknowledge that I think it's a shame that he feels that way, and I actually think that he was one of the only actors in the show who could really command a scene. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like the other actor that could command the scene was her. I thought she did pretty well as a dwarven elf. Like I thought,
she was good too.
Yeah, but she was also the one I did a whole video about her and how like this is progress, this is change, this is good. Right, we need to her her entire monologue was nothing about how great the story was, how great Tolkien is. Like, it's so wonderful to like to be a part of this incredible story. It was about like, look at my skin color, and that's the most important thing about why I'm here. And maybe
I just find that incredibly regressive way to look at things.
Sure, yeah.
At what point was that interview given? Like, was she still under like a non-disclosure sort of thing? Like, was she allowed to give spoilers out at that point?
Which interview?
I don't know. I haven't.
Oh, the one I'm referencing. It was I grabbed a bunch of clips. It was like at the red carpet premiere. It was when they first released it. So it was out to reviewers and things like that at that point. I don't know if it was out to the public yet.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the Respect Tolkien hashtag?
I have seen it.
Okay.
No, you're laughing.
I am not really.
Yeah. They're they can get annoying.
So fill us in, because I mean, this is when I like the people that I follow on Tolkien Society. I had a very good, like, polite, respectful conversation with one of the UK guys in the Tolkien Society just this week, kind of over this issue, not Rings of Power. No, actually, Rings of Power in particular. Like he was quoting me in my Babylon Bee interview, and I sort of told him, go watch the whole thing, and he did, and we struck up a conversation. But like he's like very focused on this, and I think that from what I've seen, the Respect Tolkien hashtag people are the ones that are probably where we should be looking. Like, I think those are the people that they're talking about. But I don't really know as much.
So for those of you who don't know, Jonathan knows I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And I'm probably going to lose 1,000 followers for saying this, but I think that there's a lot of people in the hashtag Respect Tolkien category who are good people, but there's also a lot of them that are bad faith trolls. And I remember anytime I would say anything nice about the Rings of Power, I mean, I got called Saruman. I got called, people were like, oh, his Amazon check cleared. I had a lot of people who were saying really messed up things to me. And I was offended by it because I really care about this.
I'm glad
stuff.
you had your Twitter therapist to go to when it was.
Yeah, I had to talk to my wife, have some therapy sessions.
Oh, there you go. That's good.
The people on Twitter made me feel bad. But yeah, I've seen a lot of. There's a difference between, if you have a brain and a pulse, you can tell the difference between a joke and something that truly has malice attached to it. And again, there's a lot of good people who do they're well intended with the Respect Tolkien group, because there's a group of them. They have Twitter group chats, and they they coordinate on Discord, and they kind of pile on people's statuses. And I've had it happen to me, when the episodes were appearing. But again, I have good relationships with some of them who are well intended, at least from what I've seen from them. But others who I don't associate with, I have seen some vitriol, and honestly, just stuff that we don't need in the community, in my opinion.
It's just like politics. The edges of the conversation end up taking up the lion's share of all the time that we discuss about it, right? And so, like, our discussion, like, I'm sure we disagree on some things too. I mean, there are certain times that we come across that, but we're not going to do it with malice and with anger and with denigration, right? Which is what happens on Twitter, generally speaking, anyway. Unless we follow Mixer on Twitter, like that, then it's just laughter. But yeah, you get like let's see, right? The response is like, let me go find.
And a lot of it, to some of their credit, a lot of it comes from passion and care, and maybe a lot of people who have a little bit too much time on their hands. But also, I do think that there's a lot of people who are going on and putting up that hashtag every day that really just like to be a part of a big pile of negative energy, and they get excitement from fighting people on Twitter.
It's so much easier to be negative about something than it is to actually be a positive representation of it.
Like, I feel it when because I only started on Twitter pretty recently. And like, it's really easy to get sucked into the hate clicks and the outrage clicks.
Yeah.
Like, it happens so fast.
And I'll openly admit too, you know, there's been times where, you know, I've done a pile on something, and then after I've kind of thought about it and been like, you know, maybe I didn't need to go that hard. Like Tolkien Society has me blocked. So, you know, I've been guilty of it at times. I have tried to be nicer, you know, recently. And like I said, I think that there's people who do have good intentions and then they get caught up in the negative energy. And then there's people who just really have an inappropriate level of malice.
Yeah. And it's sad that, yeah, like I said, that those define the conversation. In fact, what I'm hoping, and I always pile on things that aren't fully told. I mean, I piled on. I found my original. I'll have to find it again. It's on the website. I'm kind of purging the 15,000 articles on theonering.com because it's hurting our SEO. In fact, having too many articles that nobody's clicking on. But I found my original review of The Fellowship of the Ring, and it's scathing. It's like I hated that movie. I didn't realize how much it was. There was a vitriol there that I really disliked it, and so my mindset has always been like, if it's not true to the original, I'm not gonna like it. And so that's always been the way that I've been, and I'm trying to shift that a little bit. And so someday, what I'm hoping is I can get somebody who really likes the Rings of Power and just have a conversation and discuss, like, why do you like it? Let me tell you why I don't like it. And hopefully it doesn't go into the, you know, a respect Tolkien hashtag type of approach, or you're a racist because you dislike, like, and that's the hard part, is that can we even have those discussions between the disagreements even in this fandom anymore? Because there's a wide open bell curved middle that could have that conversation. But the sounds echoing off the mountains that we hear are the people shouting from up top, like with these kinds of vitriolic statements ultimately that make you hear nothing else except that continuing echo. Yeah.
I think it's just, it's fun to flame on people on social media, right? I mean, that's why people do it. And I think so much is said in those spaces that if you were sitting down across from somebody, you would never, ever talk to them that way. And I mean, it's one of the great issues in our culture right now in general. But, you know, I really, going back to that, I think there's an actual problem, which is the way we're having to racify absolutely everything right now.
Sure.
And it, you know, it's going to create every time when Amazon, you know, like you were saying, Mixer, which was that, you know, hey, they want this because it drives interest. Well, that's just playing harder into the divisiveness of it all, right? And, you know, they're a bad actor in that way too, in a big way. And I don't know, it's like you want to address these kinds of issues, like, hey, look, like Aragorn is a character that is dear to people, that was drawn a certain way by a genius who embodies so many different things. Like, can't we just let him be him? And it's, I know you can't, because you're a cis, male, whatever, and you're wrong for thinking so, and that's just your bias and all these other things. And it's like, well, that's when
you're not allowed to speak simply because of who you are, which granted happens on all the sides now. It seems like everybody's trying to
absolutely.
That. I was in a meeting for work stuff. I was a bunch of small business owners, and they were talking about how to get more women involved. And I want to bring up something. Somebody said, like, I don't think you're the right person to be talking about this. I'm like, shut the hell up. I have hired many females in the past, and I live with 3 females. Like, to say that I'm not allowed to talk about it simply because I was a male. At the
I have a mom, a sister,
right? It's anyway, that sort of idea that
a wife.
You can shut down. I don't like the idea that you should shut down conversation from anyone, but if somebody only shut down the conversation if somebody's actually like unwilling to speak to you, if it's like a Piers Morgan style conversation where there's just yelling at each other, calling each other names, generally that's not where I want to go with anything. Only time I've been blocked from somebody from, actually I think it was thewondering.net, was when there was a quote that went up from Peter Jackson that said we originally had Aragorn and Arwen naked in the glittering caves behind Helm's Deep. You didn't know that? Yeah, they actually were gonna, I think they even filmed part of it, and then Gimli was apparently gonna come across him and be like, or something like that, and the guy said something like, I don't know, it was like one of those, like, tell me I've watched The Lord of the Rings without ever having watched Lord of the Rings, or something like that. And then I literally took a picture from the book, which was Peter Jackson's essentially like movie autobiography or official confirmed biography after The Lord of the Rings came out, with quotes from him, and I highlighted it, and then he just blocked me because he couldn't, and deleted his tweet because he realized like how incredibly dumb that was. I'm not gonna like lie on Twitter ever about anything, but those are the people I don't want to have a conversation with. The people I do want to have a conversation with are the people who are willing to talk. So I'm gonna try and get some people on. That'd be far more interesting than, I mean, living your life in an echo chamber of conversation is really boring. Talking to other people who have differing ideas can actually be really interesting, make you think, and hopefully make the other person think too, if they're open to it, and we don't get enough of that too. So. Woo! That's all. That's all my stuff. Wow, go and light on stuff. Actually, wait. I've got one more thing. Hold on here. One more thing today. Elrond.
Wow.
Oh no.
I mean, the guy's 63. Give him a break.
Is he 63?
Yeah.
Yeah, but how old is Viggo Mortensen?
He's like 60 as well. Let's see.
Yeah.
Viggo Mortensen is 64. Yeah,
a year older.
They're getting up there in age, guys. And
you shave that beard and throw some hair dye in.
It's the hairline. I think it's the hairline.
Yeah.
They'd whatever movie magic. He could be young again.
Everybody's got their bad days.
There's Viggo.
He looks good.
He looks,
it's not a very good
unflattering picture. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not everybody can be Keanu.
That's right. Yeah.
It's my second Keanu Reeves reference of the evening.
There we go.
Yeah. Look at him. He's still the
Regal. He's 140 there. We've
got Liam Neeson. We got Harrison Ford. They're still
Hugo Weaving was never a leading man, though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Agent Smith is one of my all-time favorite characters.
Sam O'Neill was on. I was watching a Netflix series that Sam O'Neill was on there being interviewed for Jurassic Park. I don't know. Have Sam O'Neill and Hugo Weaving ever been in a movie together?
I can see that a little bit. I can. Sam O'Neill as Agent Smith. Now that would have been interesting. Mr. Anderson. Yeah. Anyway, guys, it's been like 23 years now. Wait, when did it come out? 2000, right? 2001. Yeah, 22 years. 21 and
I remember
Matrix came out in 98 or 99.
Matrix 99.
99, yeah.
And that was the same summer that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out. Wait, did I have that right? Yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Hey, look, those were stories that were actually like brand new and weren't like rehashes.
Man. So that was a wonderful summer. I was like, we're doing this in movies now?
Yeah, so who's going to go see, let's see, we've got The Little Mermaid, we've got the new Pixar movie, we've got
Indiana
the new Indiana
Jones
Jones.
coming out,
I didn't see Guardians of the Galaxy. What else? Oh, no.
Saw Spider-Verse yesterday.
Yeah? And?
Yeah.
How was it?
Incredibly beautiful.
No.
Deliver on quality compared to the first one?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
It's part one. I did not know that going in.
Well, there are two parts?
Yeah, like it's very long.
This is like people who went to see Dune. They're like, wait, this is 3 hours now. We've only got.
I was glad. Now Dune was cool. Okay, but anyway, yeah, with Dune, I was glad. I was like, oh, thank God, there's another 3 hours coming.
What's funny about Dune is that these movies are taking so long to make that it's like, oh, is it gonna be like 20 years before anybody finds out that Paul Atreides actually isn't the good guy?
It's gonna be
don't ruin it for me. I haven't read Dune. That's my wheelhouse.
Oh, really?
It's
man.
So I'll do a hot take here.
Yeah.
I read Dune before the movie came out because I had never read it before, and it was a gap in my reading, and I was underwhelmed by Dune. But I realized that it's because Dune has so saturated the sci-fi genre at this point that there's like everything that it does is obvious now because we've seen it for so many decades.
Because it set the tone for so much.
Yes, because it was so influential at the time. Now to read it is a letdown.
It's like reading all of Ray Bradbury's short stories now. You're like, oh, this is the same thing I've seen in like the Outer Limits recently or whatever, right? What's the show on Netflix? Black
Mirror.
Black Mirror. Yeah, right.
Which I've never seen, but I've read all Bradbury.
Actually, Ray Bradbury was actually like writing from scratch here. He wasn't like sitting on anybody's shoulders. Well, not the same sci-fi shoulders that we have now.
People think I'm a fan of fantasy novels because I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I'm not. I have not read any of the other fantasy, like none of it. I don't care because it's all really derivative. You know,
I was really interested in the first book of Dune, and I have a hot take on it that upset. I'm not a Dune bro. There's a lot of Dune bros on
That's
Twitter
a thing, huh? The Dune bro.
who like to flame my mentions when I say this. But my hot take on Dune is, so if you know anything about Frank Herbert, he set out to deconstruct like the traditional Western sword in the stone King Arthur narrative. You know, there's a chosen one, and they are the chosen one because they just are, and they save the universe, get the girl, avenge their father. He wanted to basically take that apart, and I'll try not to give any spoilers, Garet, because I know that you haven't read it, but basically
I won't be.
His thesis is that we shouldn't trust leaders. You know, we shouldn't put all of our faith in these figures that come along and try to start these movements and change society. And that message is told through Paul Atreides. But if you read the first Dune book, which also happens to be the most popular selling Dune book, it actually reads like a traditional Western story of a chosen hero who avenges his father,
goes into exile,
avenges his father, and wins the kingdom at the end of the book. And I also think that it's no coincidence that that's the most popular selling of the Dune series. And when you get into the other ones like Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, Dune Chapter House, people barely even know what's happening in those books. You know, you really have to be a fan to be reading those. And I think that that's no coincidence. I think that he actually, in trying to deconstruct the traditional story of the Chosen One,
like, wait, the
he actually told a
Stop
great Chosen One story.
And it was like, you did good.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Bye. Yeah.
Huh. I haven't, I read Dune. I read the book before going to see the movie again, and it's been a while. I think I remember slightly like finding the first three like fine, good enough. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them quite a bit at the time, but I was on a very high sci-fi kick in probably like 11th or 12th grade.
High on spice or what?
The spice must flow.
Maybe.
Dune is one of those books that for me, it's like with the Harry Potter books, I get about halfway into it and I just don't find the writing all that compelling. You know, like the story might be okay, but the writing isn't good enough to like. I'm like a Cormac McCarthy
I love
fan.
the aesthetic.
I read him for the writing.
Picture,
you know,
when I'm reading. I think what's funny whenever I post that, because every once in a while I'll do a Dune troll. I'll say Tolkien came up with desert worms. 20 years before Frank Herbert. Yep. And they get mad, and then they're like, "Oh no, it's not like that. You have to read the rest of the books." And I'm like, "Actually, I don't have to read the rest of the book. I can stop after one."
Oh man,
but I kid.
Yeah. The last three Dune books: Chapter House Dune, God Emperor of Dune, and Heretics of Dune. I think it was. I don't even remember anything about them. I just remember being completely 100% bored.
Yeah, you just know they're weird.
Yeah, I had no idea where it was going. It was probably over my head at the time too, and I just they were so thick. I was like, if I can get through this, it'll be amazing. And then I realized, no, I don't even want to get through this after finishing, even though I did. But yeah, they do. There's a lot of stuff that seems derivative. I would say that Dune doesn't seem derivative to me because at least in the world that he creates, it was unique for the time. The ideas of the spice world and like all that sort of stuff, that it was new. It wasn't a derivative story that you'd see like in Terry Brooks' Sword of Shannara series, for instance, which is completely derivative of Tolkien. But
oh, I think there are concepts in it that are way ahead of its time, like the Butlerian Jihad, against. They're like thousands of years past a point where they had to, the human race had to collectively destroy artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We see those concepts coming out today in stories. And I think Frank Herbert was really way ahead of his time with that. Super interesting.
Yeah. And he, even better, he created an entire career for his son to keep writing Dune stories.
So did Tolkien.
Kevin J. Anderson. Yeah,
that's a good point. Huh. So they are.
So a lot of these authors, Like even Louis L'Amour, isn't it? Like his granddaughter's writing his books now or something.
Is that really true?
Tolkien too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Depending on how you view the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Clive Cussler, I think his son writes those now. And
The Giants.
Yeah. There's like it becomes a nom de plume that just carries on for like
goes on forever and ever.
Becomes so formulaic.
Well, we don't want this live stream to carry on forever and ever and ever. And I feel like once we get into like talking about the finer points of Dune, maybe that's the time to push back. We're not going there. At least we didn't even talk about the Little Mermaid at all. Who went and saw that? Huh? No,
I haven't seen it,
guys. Guys, okay. I'm just going to make this point again. This is what we see in the Rings of Power. This is what we see in Magic: The Gathering, or whatever, the Lord of the Rings: The Gathering. I'm not sure what they're calling it. Is that you have Prince Eric, who is white as the driven snow. His mother is from like the Sudan, and his father's Pakistani. It's exactly like that's what it is. And I'm just.
I haven't seen it.
Gosh, can we like at least try a little bit? Like she could fall in love with just a guy who's like has two parents or mixed race parents, and then he's a mixed race. Like we can do that. It's not that hard. We live in a world with that much diversity to pick from. But somehow, like they have to go against genetics and figure out that it's better to make the point rather than to be real about it.
In terms of movies targeted towards preteen girls that are going into theaters, I'm much more interested in the Barbie movie than I am in Little Mermaid.
I don't even know if that's targeted towards preteen girls. It feels like from the trailers, it's not.
It looks amazing.
And I have a hot take here. I think for stuff, I mean, the Little Mermaid, and again, I haven't seen it, but it's
How
essentially...
hot do you think Barbie is? Is that where you go? No.
No, it's essentially supposed to be, it's a musical, right? I mean, I think it's based off of like a Danish folk tale originally.
Christian Andersen,
Yeah, but it's essentially supposed to be a musical. And I think in the spirit of performance, it doesn't really bother me that much if for something like that, the differences are so blatant that you're supposed to not really notice. Like if you watch Hamilton, on Broadway, Alexander Hamilton wasn't black, but the guy who has been played him for like 10 years, is. So it's for things like that in the spirit of performance, it doesn't really, I don't get worked up about it.
Yeah, sure.
So if it's riffing off of Broadway, it's okay.
Yes.
Hamilton was
Depending on
supposed
the
to be
story.
that, right? But he did that with all of Hamilton.
It depends on like what your goal is. Like how immersive are you going for? And if you're coming out with a movie like The Northman,
well,
that should be pretty immersive.
I always feel like when the original creator of that piece is involved, like they have license to do whatever they want to. Like they have license, like he created Hamilton, right? It's meant to be that what you see on stage is what he meant it to be. Whereas if you see something like, to me, even The Little Mermaid, when it's remade, or The Lord of the Rings and The Rings of Power, when it's remade, essentially, then I think that's where it becomes unacceptable to me. I'm trying to find the right word.
So,
What were you gonna
Jonathan,
say?
I think to your point, like
I think there's a fine line, and maybe The Little Mermaid is a little bit too immersive. So you want to see things that make sense.
Yeah.
I just think for things like that, like
Denzel as Macbeth was fantastic. I mean, you guys see that? That was incredible.
Yes.
Well, there's no Scotsman that looked like Denzel Washington, but who cares? He was awesome. He was also awesome in Much Ado About Nothing.
This is
a great recent example is the thing that just came out on Netflix with Cleopatra.
I knew you were going to go there. Yeah.
Which, okay, if I'm watching that and all of these Egyptians, they look similar in the court.
Yeah.
Fine, that's consistent. But Netflix itself, the documentary had insisted that this is the way Cleopatra looked.
Well,
which
and it's
we
a
all know is
documentary.
wrong.
It's not
Right.
it's not an interpretation of a story.
Yes. Which we all know is not true. She was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty and they're very famous for, marrying their brothers and sisters. So they looked pretty standard, they came out looking one way. And it was their insistence with that documentary, and they have it right there in the first episode. I started watching the first episode, and it wasn't even that made me turn it on. The production value is just not good on it. I was like, I'm not even going to watch this for research purposes.
Maybe got a grant from the German government.
Maybe. But you watch something like that and you're like, well, that's ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
you're insisting on a lie right now.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm gonna land this long live streaming plane down. So I'll sign myself off first, guys. If you enjoyed this, I appreciate those of you who are sticking around for the whole time. That's great. We were hoping Michael could join us, Michael Grumbine, who we do the podcast with every week, and he has kids going across the country to meet with his grandparents. So he said, like, I got to prepare them all. So I guess he wasn't able to make it. But if you enjoyed this, you can always hear more of us if you go to theonering.com. You can get our podcast there. You can become a member. You can join our Discord. You can get our extended podcast, which this week we did our 1 year anniversary and it got really long. I'm really sorry about that. So maybe it was a little too much navel gazing. I don't know, but it was fun. We figure after 1 year we got through it, and I was celebrating. It was a lot of big firsts. We had I calculated how many listens we had for the podcast across the entire year. It was like 80,000, which was far more than I anticipated, and I was really happy with that for the first year. And so we're hey, I spent a lot of time doing this. I want to get a little bit of a pat on. Anyway, all right, sorry. So yeah, go to theonering.com/members if you want to become a member and join us there. Mixer, I'll go to you next. Where should we follow you? What should we do to see you everywhere?
Thank you. So yeah, you can find me right now on Twitter at Middle Earth Mixer. My podcast is on Apple and Spotify right now. I have lots of big plans for what I'm going to do with the podcast. Unfortunately, my wife and I are moving right now, and she's also pregnant. So I've been very busy, and I haven't been able to put the amount of effort that I want to into it, but it is coming. So follow me on Twitter. Be keeping up with that.
Awesome. Austin. What Austin is Austin, you should just buy Austin's book. I don't know what else I can say. You tell us where do you want people to follow you? Twitter, right?
Yeah, Dr. Austin Freeman on Twitter. I do have the book out. It's Tolkien Dogmatics. The best place to get it is direct from a publisher, which is Lexham Press. And we have an ebook and regular format. Just in case anybody is interested, I am teaching a 10-week summer course using the book on Hobbit and theology. So we'll be reading The Hobbit concurrently with Tolkien Dogmatics, and the registration is still open for that. $100 for surveyors.
Where do you go for that?
It's if you go to hc.edu.
Say that again. I lost you for a second, or we still lost you. Austin, you're frozen. They don't want you to know about this.
Onto the Twitter posting of this show.
Say that one more time, because I totally lost you. You cut out for just a second.
All right. Does it work? Does private chat work?
Yeah. Did you put it in there? I guess
global dark forces are trying to stop us from getting good
there
content.
Boom. Awesome. Here we go. This will be a long banner if it fits in there, but there we go. Bam. Go there.
Yeah.
I'll link it in the notes below too.
Yeah. I can post the link to the Twitter announcement for this.
Yeah. Retweet it with that Twitter announcement and go there. So that's reading The Hobbit and Tolkien Dogmatics and diving deep into it, which a lot of people with The Hobbit would be like, deep Hobbit? What are you talking about? But again, The Hobbit was born out of Middle Earth, which is what Tolkien spent his entire life doing. And it's sort of like, it scratches just the surface, because he wasn't even sure when he started it if The Hobbit was going to be a part of Middle Earth. Like it wasn't. But that's what he knew, and that's what he wrote, and so those characters all intruded into. He discovered them as he wrote it, which is, I think, the way I like to put it when we talk about Tolkien and how he wrote. It wasn't that these characters, like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to outline this character, and he's going to be at this part. Right? He discovered it as he wrote the story. He didn't outline everything and figure out everything and create these characters. Like, they just appeared to him, and that's why even to him he calls it like a history, because it's something he feels like. Is this right, Austin? It's something he feels like he was meant to write, or that he was like,
something he discovered almost. Yeah. Somebody asked him a question about a particular character in Middle Earth, and he said, where did the blue wizards go? I think is the question. And he says, I don't know. I will try to find out.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks, Austin. I hope you'll be here again. We'll do it 2 weeks from tonight again. So I'll always send out the reminders. I hope you guys don't mind all the extra details. But Garet, it's on you. Where you can be our last push here.
Yeah. My wife and I have a podcast, YouTube, Rumble, everything coming out probably in July. The beauty saves. We're looking at kind of the theme of where we're going is how truth manifests in life through beauty, and what that looks like, and something that the East and Western Catholics are good at bringing into their faith, and as Protestants we've kind of lost that. So that's what we're examining, and
Awesome.
we're hoping that to bring that to fruition in about a month. So
Cool.
Instagram, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, it'll be there.
The beauty saves. All right.
The beauty saves. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. It was good seeing y'all, and I'm going to shut down this podcast. But you guys, we can keep chatting after we dump all these freeloaders here on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. And the one person who watched it once on Twitch, because I literally created a Twitch account. I was like, oh, just throw it on Twitch, see what happens. Yeah, pretty much nothing because I didn't do anything with it. But I'm going to land this plane. Thanks, guys, for having us, for letting us join your Friday night, and we'll see you hopefully in 2 weeks again. Take care.